Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of the Grow Rogue podcast. So today I'm joined by Tom Brouillette. Uh, Tom is an old school tech guy, and I'm using his words and not mine. He even says he's been around technology since before it was even called technology. And so one of the things that he's going to bring to this conversation is a perspective on the cultural and the changes to the economy and the changes to the way that we do everyday life that technology has had at these different intervals, right? These different iterations and these different innovations in terms of things like just the computer, the internet, the mobile phone, the smartphone, social media, and now AI. And we spend a lot of time talking about how AI is actually infiltrating and revolutionizing everything that we see around us, and specifically those supply networks that get all these things to and from. And so you're really going to enjoy this episode. I want you to pay special attention to the bit where we talk about the free and easy gathering and synthesizing of information, and then communicating that creatively and using stories, which is the differentiator today because information is just so easy to find. So make sure you listen to this whole episode. There's a lot of great takeaways. And if you are watching this on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe as always. Thanks so much. Hope you enjoy the episode. Tom, thanks so much for joining me. I know our audience is always super interested in hearing stories of those who have gone maybe slightly non-traditional paths, or that have found themselves in sort of a non-traditional present, if you will, and how that past has shaped that and vice versa. So I'd love to hear your story, your background, and what got you to be where you are and who you are today.
Okay, thanks, Reade. I'm looking forward to the opportunity. I have been in technology for about 40 years now, and the way I refer to it is that I started in technology when dinosaurs still roamed the world, which sounds kind of contrite, and everybody says they've been involved in technology for a long time. But just to give you a framework, it's the horse and buggy days when I started, there were literally no PCs. So everything was done on the old mainframe with the green screen technology. No images, no web interface, and it was a very review kind of it was a bit of an intense environment where you were continuously reviewing and using your imagination. And we used terms like desk check, which meant that we would print out the actual program code and review it on a piece of paper because we didn't have time to work on it. I remember the first portable PC that I worked on was literally this. It was a compact, in case you remember that old name. And it was literally the size of a carry-on suitcase for an airline. Anyhow, it kind of progressed. I've been involved in supply chain back since we were calling it warehousing. So went through all of the renaming and expansion and added complexities until we got to this point. So I got very interested. I started to think about it and realized the level, the cycles of improvements and revisions that we've been going through. And in looking back, I really became interested when we started seeing as many disruptions as we did. Back before COVID now, we were seeing a series of disruptions, and we called it the military had a term for it, VUCA, and can't offhand I can't remember exactly what that stands for, but an acronym describing the velocity of change and the types of change that we're experiencing. And that has, with the COVID lockdown, that went from what you would consider once in a lifetime disruption to basically almost a disruption every week. And every week, one disruption builds on another and impacts another phase of it. And so it kind of hit home. I realized at that point how critical information is, and not just information, but how do we put the information together? We have to connect the dots there, and that became a fascination for me. And I and literally in the last 3 years or so, I transitioned, starting off with the view of visibility of processing and status of product flowing through the supply chain was critical to the success of your business. To be able to move product through, you had to have the visibility. And as I started researching and investigating and producing visibility, or tracking visibility, I quickly realized that the visibility was an important foundation. It was a critical foundation, but it wasn't the value add proposition. And then I moved into the value is in the intelligence, the ability to analyze what you're seeing. And then shortly after that, I quickly realized that it's not necessarily the intelligence and analytics of what you're looking at, but the ability to actually determine next steps and actually take those steps. So you went from a visibility to the intelligence side of things, which provides the analytics, but then you quickly get into, what do I do with that? I see the analytics. I see that I'm delayed here. I see why I'm delayed. Well, what the hell do I do? And as I started to peel the onion, as it were, um, I became more and more fascinated with it, and I started learning more about the machine learning and the intelligence aspect of it, and really started lately. I've been really researching and digging into the assistant technologies, the ChatGPT, the Gemini, the Copilot, and really I'm fascinated now and amazed at the technology and the capabilities of it, to the point of finding myself treating the assistant as another person, asking questions and actually carrying on a conversation back and forth. And it's amazing what you can do. I even asked at one point, do you remember? So if I have a conversation, if I'm asking questions today, and 3 days from now I come back and I ask an add-on question or ask a comparison, are you able to go back and put all of that together? And it keeps track. The response was, yes, I keep track of all our conversations and I can put these things back together again. And it's just, on the one hand, I find it very scary and almost intimidating. But on the other hand, it's overwhelming. I've eliminated that from my mind and just look at it in amazement now. It's like a little kid almost. Look at the things. What can you do and how can you experiment? And so I'm trying to take that newfound information, that newfound capability, and really put the pieces together within a supply chain. So where I'm at now is promoting the aspect of a collaborative supply network as the end result to go back and be able to effectively sense a disruption and respond to a disruption. And that's I could go. I don't want to. I don't want to just ramble on, but you can see probably that I'm rather excited by this topic and the opportunity and the potential. Really, it kind of keeps me going until I hugely annoy my wife.
Well, I can certainly appreciate the sense of amazement, if you will,
Hmm.
because we've had a similar relationship to AI recently,
Hmm.
right? Where we have it's become much more conversational than it is,
Right.
ask and receive, if that makes sense, or giving tasks and spitting out text. It's helped us to organize. It has helped us to, for me, a person with
Hmm.
who's, some might call me, I think the term they use is neurodivergent. I don't really think in linear text, right?
Right.
So to be able um, to in a long form and not so organized way, um, just get information out of my brain, have it synthesized, verified according to external sources, right?
Hmm.
When
Hmm.
necessary, and then organized and spit out into an action plan or
Hmm.
a roadmap or things like that. And then to be able to reference that days and weeks later when it needs to be put into action, right? It's, if you could imagine, um, there's kind of this, okay, I use the analogy. Well, I'm going to save my analogies, but what we can do is we can reference that in the future when it's time to use it, and we can pick up exactly where we left off. We can almost like a journal where we can say, hey,
Hmm.
where were we on this project? Let's work on that a little bit more today. Provide an update for me to give to the team, all those kinds of things. So I'm not having to keep it all up here or even necessarily organize it in some sort of like project management system.
Hmm.
It keeps all that information. So I'm asking sort of this forgets nothing executive assistant to just bring me back to where we were before with full context and full information about what we did. And that much more so than any kind of writing or content creation. That has been the greatest benefit that we've had with AI lately.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of expand on that a little bit, the one of the greatest value propositions I get out of it is the ability and encouragement to add on to a previous thought,
Yes. Yeah.
and using the deep research capabilities of that
Yes.
assistant to
Yeah.
go out and analyze 200, 300 different pieces of information to kind of
Mm-hmm.
tie those pieces together, And it starts off with a simple question: how does this relate to that? And how does
Mm-hmm.
this enhance that, kind of a thing?
Right.
And it's
Right.
just amazing, you know. And you know what the thing of it is? The thing that's always fascinating is I keep coming back to, it's just so damn polite and encouraging, you know.
Yeah.
That's a great
Yeah.
point. Let's explore that a little bit more, you know. Um,
Yeah. Somebody came up with that idea in a room when this was being developed, and some other people said that seems kind of silly. I don't think that's
mhm.
necessary. And he said no, or she said no. I think people will really appreciate that, and I completely agree with you. We when we're having conversations, me and my chosen AI tool, I get that a lot. Where it's like, hey,
Right.
that's a good idea. Let's let's incorporate that. And it's like, thanks, buddy. I
Hmm.
appreciate the encouragement.
It kind of, it kind of, it's amazing. It's amazing uh, the thought process and the investment that people make on deciding this that I would have never thought about. There's a continuity there, you know. I mean, even to the point of asking one of my favorite things that for a while, one of my favorite things is just uh, movie research and movie reviews, and how does this relate to that? And get to the point. It's amazing. The thing that amazes me most is literal responses of, since you like these types of offbeat movies or
Yes.
this type of storyline that's a little bit off, this would be a good movie for you, or you might enjoy this, you know? And then it comes back and says, let me know what you think. And what I found is, and I thought, oh, that's kind of contrite. But the value there is the more you share, the more information, the better the response is and the
Right.
better the
Right.
conversation is. So it encourages you to actually engage, you know. It's sad that sometimes your most productive engagements are with um, a piece of software.
Well, you know what? I think here's something that it taps into. I think it allows for completely selfish conversation, right? This entire interaction is going to be about me and what I'm interested in. It's completely impartial, and it provides not just not opinions, but exact answers and recommendations. And so I think that that also encourages the engagement, right? Because this taps into something I think that's deeply human, in that what is our favorite subject? Our favorite subject of all things one could talk about, and it's ourselves, right?
Yourself,
It is
exactly.
us, and it's what we care about right now. And to be able to, because all of social media is about others, right? We try to be in the center of that. And that's sort of the negative addiction thing that a lot of people are now realizing has caused a lot of harm. You know, we're trying to put ourselves out there so that we can be a part of that
Right.
other space, right? That everyone else looks at, or that we look at and we envy and all that good stuff. You know, that
You really
that's
want
really
that social. You're looking for that social engagement
right,
that doesn't cost me anything. Almost,
right,
you know.
right.
I don't have to
Yeah,
go
and
out and
there's
put myself out there. I can sit in a dark room and just exchange and
right,
create my own persona that I'm
right. Yeah.
socializing, right?
So this is one of those things that, like with social media 20 years ago, because social media is it's a little over 20 years old now. And so we now have a pretty good bit of data, right? And some pretty good anthropological,
Right.
sociological results to look at and say, well, is this a good thing? And I think we've largely made a decision about that. Is that yes, it can be good in these circumstances, but too much in this and all that. I'm super curious to see what that type of feedback and analysis looks like for our use of AI, because it's not just something that people like me and you use, right? It's my pastor referenced it in a sermon yesterday, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is clearly a thing that will very likely have as big, if not bigger, impact on culture, on business, on the way we communicate, on the way that we operate, than social media did, than the smartphone did, than computers and the internet did. So it's a really, really interesting time to be around, and I think it's super interesting that you've been able to experience. I've been able to experience a good bit of that, right? The smartphone, social media, and you've got even more experience to draw from to compare these
Right.
these societal shifts that were created by technology, which is it's incredibly interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of I am my current state, I guess, if I look at it that way, is I'm leveraging the technology um, to expand my thoughts and develop processes to improve the supply chain. I'm hung up on this supply network concept, and I use the technology to be able to do the research and put my thoughts into something that's cohesive and fact-based, based on a broader spectrum than anything that I could do. And
Right.
you know, I see two results of that. One is the speed that I'm able to
Yes.
actually develop something. You know, I am just fascinated with this, and I never get tired of talking about it. You know, I'm used to, I've been posting, writing some articles and things of that nature for a while, having, um, speaking in front of groups and things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature, presentations. And the most difficult part is, well, first of all, the most difficult part is getting started and coming up with that idea.
Right.
But after you've got that, it can be very difficult to put that together into a story that makes sense to me,
Right.
and that
Right.
people can engage and really kind of accept and promote. Whereas I can focus, I can utilize the assistant to bring to the table corresponding research that promotes the concept, that says this is what people have seen, and this is, you know, this is based on my research, this is what I'm seeing. So I don't have to go through all of that. And what it almost turns you, I don't know about you, but what I find is that I you go from it, it becomes a much more creative process where you're reviewing, revising, and adding thoughts to it, rather than the actual construction work,
Right.
if you know what I mean.
Well, I completely agree, and that's exactly where I was going with that thought. Once you started to bring that up, was that I think it puts much more of the this is the opportunity and the challenge, or the challenge and opportunity, right? Those are always go hand in hand. Is that now that information is, we've been saying this for years before AI, that it's never been easier to find. It's never been easier
Yeah.
to collect,
Mm-hmm.
research and all that kind of stuff. Well, facts and information and general, tips and all that kind of stuff is no longer of any value
Mm-hmm.
if that's the information that you're giving away in, say, a presentation or marketing content, whatever. Much more of the emphasis now is placed on, well, can you make me care, right? Do you
Right.
have some sort of a story that you can utilize? Do you have a creative storytelling method or way of communicating that catches my attention? That is even more important. Now, the opportunity there is, well, good, you don't have to spend as much time on the information gathering and the creation of
The nuts and
presentation
bolts, if you
materials.
will. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So you can spend more of that time on, all right, how am I going to leverage this information to creatively communicate this to this audience, and how can I customize this message to the audience so that it is hyper relevant to them, because I've got to bring them something more than just information that I've compiled. There's just no more value. There's no longer any value in just presenting information.
It's the knowledge that the data brings that's
Right.
important. or that they can bring that's important. And it's really, that's the point. It's a matter of how do you make it interesting that people can actually can consume and want to consume,
That's right.
right? So it's always difficult to get your concept across and try to promote it to a wider audience. I think, from my perspective, this concept of a supply network that brings a social aspect to the physical process in order to address your challenges. But some of the things that I've been fascinated that really caught my interest, is, especially starting with COVID, was it's not so much, in the supply chain you talk about delays and impact of delays. And one of my favorite stories was that, we early on in the pandemic, we started to run out of milk in the grocery stores, right? And the story that really kind of put it all together for me was the challenge was a change in the consumption of the product. So early, we we it was a process and a flow. Early on, the dairy farmers were producing the milk and and packaging the milk for individual consumer consumption. That was their main focus. And then as schools and businesses and um, um, things, as life started to change a bit, and the consumption of the product went from, a single person consumable, a quart,
Mm-hmm.
gallon, to providing milk for an entire group of people. It went from bottling it in a big canister that could be put on a machine and individual glasses of milk poured, for instance. Um, and then all of a sudden, that was the vast majority of the consumption. And so the dairy farmers and the producers shifted their packaging from a consumer based to an institutional based. And so they had the supplies at the institutional packaging method, but they didn't have enough of the individual use. So when all the institutions closed, they didn't need all of that. And so literally they were pouring that stuff down the drain because they couldn't rebottle it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that kind of started my journey, if you will. It really kind of lit a fire for me to and started the importance of the visibility, and not just the visibility, but the pieces that bring that all together in the process flow. And so now I'm at the point of a supply network that can sense and respond to disruptions in different patterns in order to be able to meet the demands. You know, from a supply chain perspective, we've gone from, or we're moving. We haven't gone from. We're moving from a lowest cost provider. In the industry, we've spent 40 years driving costs down because that was the impetus. We didn't worry about the stability or the capability of the supply chain. We worried about driving costs down. And then as soon as we started experiencing disruptions across the the global network, we realized the fragility that we had built into this.
Right.
Right. And so we need to change the aspect from a low cost production model to a demand model that meets the consumer demand. It's more important that I provide the product to the customer to purchase than it is that it's made in China or Vietnam, India, or
Mm-hmm.
Florida, or wherever it might be. I got to have the product to sell, you know. And so that's where the whole concept, and that, in my opinion, is the next frontier for the supply chain. Or I am big on promoting a change in the term to supply network rather than supply chain,
Right.
because a chain implies an end to end, a single connection, right?
Right.
Where the network implies this. If you think of a neural network or a social network, it's people coming together in a hub to understand and communicate
Right.
directly. So, but now I'm using the technology the to be able to promote that idea and make it interesting to people in concepts, in examples.
So is that the mission now? It is, you're sort of an evangelist for this transformation of understanding of supply networks, so that we
That's
can
it.
hopefully avoid these
Mm-hmm.
issues in the future.
That's it, exactly. I came to an aha moment for myself when I realized that. And now what I am trying to do actually is generate the same aha moment for others in the market and in the industry, so that we can start moving forward in that direction. It's not it's not a new concept. It's putting pieces together in a different way.
Right. Well, that goes back to what we were talking about, is that the information is no longer difficult to access, but
Mm-hmm.
now difficult to access. But now what's difficult is getting that information, compiling it, and then placing it in a format or in a forum or in a method of delivery
Mm-hmm.
that makes people stop what they're doing and say, this is the important stuff, not
Yep.
all the other stuff, but this right here is what's important. So, how are you doing that? What is your main method of delivering that message?
Um, I am involved. I am promoting that through discussions in professional organizations. I've done a couple of presentations, working sessions, or uh, learning sessions with some the local chapters of professional organizations here in Charlotte. I live in the Charlotte area. Promoting more on social networks like LinkedIn, and Medium. I find Medium to be a
Yeah,
fascinating
yeah.
uh, uh, way to promote information, and um, it's it's more information and thought promotion rather than advertising. Is, I guess, the way I put it. Um, and different discussions like this. I'm actively looking for ways for different podcasts and different people to talk to promote this idea. So, and the other thing is, it's a matter of experimentation. What works, what doesn't work.
Right.
Mhm.
So, Tom, if there was one takeaway from this that a listener or a viewer might have had his ears or her ears perked up
Mhm.
when you talked about some of the, supply chain networks, right, versus supply
Mhm.
chains, or supply networks rather.
Mhm.
What would be that one takeaway, right, where they walk away and they talk to their people, their team, and they say, look, this guy Tom Brouillette, he had a really interesting point, and we got to make some changes, and this is what he said. What would that one takeaway be that kind of encapsulates your message?
The the most important thing to look at or use to promote the message is helping people understand the value to them, first of all. and the value to their organization, second of all. This is, we talk about digital transformation and implementing new software like it's going to change the world. It's not, the software is the easy part of it. The hard part of it is the human aspect. It's getting the human, the person, to accept and really promote the change. This is what it means to us. We have to, if we start thinking about it from the personal perspective, how does it impact my team? How does it impact my organization? What is the value to this? Then the concepts can flow in. You don't, the days are gone when we go in and we buy a piece of software, install the software, and everything is good again. And especially in this area, the technology and the software is the easy part. The hard part is the change management. So that's the one thing that I would promote. The thing that you need to spend your time on is getting people to understand what it means to them personally and accept that and engage.
I couldn't agree more, and I can't think of a better way to conclude this. Tom, what is the best way for others to learn from you, to follow you, and to interact with you?
Probably right now I am spending the most time on LinkedIn and building that network and promoting those concepts on LinkedIn. So the velocity of my interaction and my postings is increasing and is only going to increase still more. So I think probably through LinkedIn would be the best way. But then, what I've learned, it's kind of funny because at first when you get involved in these social networks, it's more, I looked at it as kind of a headhunting thing. It's more or less I'm collecting trophies. Oh, look at me. I've got 2,000 connections, or I've got whatever. That doesn't mean anything until you've actually created a relationship. So,
right.
It's really just the engaging in the experimentation. So if you're on LinkedIn or if you're on Instagram or if you're even on TikTok, I'm fascinated with TikTok now. Look for me there, and I'm happy to engage and share. It's sharing that makes it better. It's that social interaction, in a safe way, I guess. But yeah, LinkedIn would be the best place.
Well, Tom, we'll make sure that people can find you if they're watching this episode, folks. If you're watching this, please make sure to like the video and subscribe here on YouTube. Check the description section for Tom's LinkedIn profile. Make sure to send him a connection request and say hello. And as always, I want to thank my guest, Tom Brouillette, for joining me. Tom, thank you very much. And for the listeners, for the audience, thank you all for checking out another episode. And I will see you on the next episode of the Grow Rogue podcast. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Reade.